No.
Ok. Good afternoon, everyone. Boa tarde. Sejam bem-vindos. Vou fazer aqui a introdução também em inglês. Todos estarão certamente aptos para conseguir isso comigo. Good afternoon, everyone, in the room and online. I'm David Kral. I am the director of the course in public administration and also a civil servant in the past and public manager, but I'm still a public worker at the university nowadays and only teaching at ipps-iscte. So by that reason and on the behalf of ipps-iscte, it is a real pleasure to welcome you to this session. Warm welcome to those of you that are in this room, but also everyone joining also online via YouTube, in particular public administration managers, civil servants that are following us online, and also those from different countries. I know that this session creates a great desire to be followed also in different countries. So welcome to all of you. This is a hybrid session in a hybrid format, and this is something that we also value deeply at ipps-iscte. First, building the bridge between academic knowledge and the realities of public governance. And our courses, the Masters, the PhD in Public Administration, aim to combine this approach, as to be said, the conceptual rigor with the professional relevance. So this session is a clear expression of that commitment of ipps-iscte between theory and practice. And let me also briefly acknowledge and give a very special word of thanks to our guest speaker, for accepting once again our invitation to be here with us today at ipps-iscte. It is a great honor for me to introduce you Professor Gert Buckegaert. Professor Gert Buckegaert is an international, very well-known and recognized influent scholar in contemporary public administration and public governance topics. Over several decades, his work has shaped how we understand and debate public sector reform, performance management, public financial management, and particularly the conditions under which public institutions can earn and sustain trust. He's professor emeritus at Turbulent University in Belgium, and is associated with the Public Governance Institute, which is a leading center for research and international dialogue in our field. From some years to the present, he is also teaching in this house, so he is also second or third house. I don't want to be very protagonist of that, but I would consider him from our house already, as he's teaching every year here at our master program in public administration. The topic of today's presentation is both, I would say, intellectually demanding and practically urgent. The futures of the public sector, and in particular, the features of governance, trust, and performance in turbulent times. Public administrations are increasingly asked to do more at a greater speed and under greater scrutiny, often with tight resources and high expectations. We see rising complexity in policy challenges like political instability, demographic change, social inequality, cybersecurity, climate change, and the emergency also of technologies such as AI and digital transition movements. We also face these challenges under another challenge, I would say, that is polycrisis. multiple disruptions occurring at the same time and tracking institutions behind routines, ways of working, as you can see in Ukraine, Venezuela, Cuba, Iran nowadays, and those countries, just to mention some. At the same time, public administrations operate not only on these disruptive political environments that can polarize and volatile, but also in a new era of populism, disinformation, and I would say also weaker public institutions that we must enforce and combat these weaker public institutions. So this tests the balance nowadays between political responsiveness and professional neutrality, and it raises fundamental questions about the rule of law, the institutional safeguards, and the professional standards that enable public servants to serve citizens impartially. In this context, trust is not a soft issue, it becomes a core governance resource. If citizens trust institutions to be competent, fair, and reliable, administrations can act with greater legitimacy and capacity. If trust erodes, even well-designed policies become harder to implement, and daily interactions with citizens for sure become more fragile. In Portugal, the OECD survey evidence that shows that trust in central government is comparatively low, and that satisfaction with administrative services is also below the OECD average. Facts that make today's discussion especially relevant for both scholars and practitioners. I would say that for practitioners, these are not abstract concerns. They shape capacity, legitimacy, and the everyday ability to deliver results fairly and reliably. For researchers and students, they raise equally demanding questions. What can we reasonably know about the future? What should we do professionally and institutionally? And how to prepare for it? I would also say another question would be, what may we hope for in terms of democratic governance and public value in this future? So Professor Bucayert, his letter for sure will invite us to think prospectively, but also responsibly, not only about the prediction for its own sake, but future thinking as a way of strengthening strategic judgment, institutional resilience, and the quality of public decision making. So once again, Professor Bucayert, thank you very much for being here with us. And thank you for this session again in Portugal, in Lisbon, and especially in Iscte. We are very glad to have you here. Thank you very much. As far as yours. You want to sit there?
I'll share the PowerPoint. Check.
Started.
So thank you, West Farage, my good colleague and friend. Thank you, David, for this generous introduction. And I must say it's always a pleasure and an honor to be here, not just in Portugal and in Lisbon, but also at Iscte here in Siga. Always great to see great colleagues and great students around. I must warn you that because of it's raining, if you want to start a competition with Belgium, you will lose. So from that point of view, it's a generous country and with a great history, and obviously preparing, since you are all here, preparing a great future. So that's what we're all there for. I think futures is a general topic. We are in the field of public management, public governance, public policy, and that means we look at the future. But obviously we have to look at the past too, but we are not historians. We have to know history, good to be better prepared for the future. And to remain relevant, we certainly have to watch closely this future. Does this work?
It should be working. I can change it. I can help.
You see, in reality, it's sometimes difficult to make progress. I mean, the PowerPoint moving forward. So looking at futures is, of course, nothing new. I think it's about asking three relevant questions, which are very, let's say, essential. First of all, since we work on evidence-based issues, the question is, what can we know? I think that's the first element, and you know that this is under pressure. I think I will start. It's easier. What can we know? And I think we all are aware that the dynamics of data and the degree of truth becomes an issue. So when we say evidence-based, what does it mean, evidence? And how can we convince that we have evidence? The second is, what should we do? Obviously, that's what the civil servants here and the students for the future, we want to develop policies, we want to service delivery, and what should we do? That's a second question. And the third one is a kind of normative question. What may we hope for? We are in social sciences, and so that's a normative question. And I will come back to the next slide to say the normative frame that I'm using, and hopefully most of us are using, all of us are using, is a democratic state with the rule of law, which is used to be obvious even in Europe, but it's not necessarily obvious if you look around what is happening here. And so that's the framework, what we should hope for in the future, in the European context. It's not new to think about futures. There are different examples in the past. We have the utopias, of course, but we also have the Club of Rome, Binot for the experts amongst us, EPA. I won't give this history here. And I think the question is how to look into the future. So first, let's start, and I have 10 points. So I have 10 points of tensions and problems, and then I will say what possible responses could be. Responses are not always clear answers, but that's a challenge also for a next generation of PhD researchers and for research in itself. So the first context is the degree of democracy in the world. And I think the colors, because you just to explain it, the bluer and the greener, the better from the point of view of solid, strong democracies. The yellowish and redder, it's the danger here. And what we see, this is kind of index, democracy index, and the evolution here. I think to be very clear, the green of the US should now be yellow and orange, moving in this direction here. So this is an evolving story, and obviously it has a huge impact on what we are doing in the public sphere here. The number of countries and the populations in these countries is atrophying, is shrinking. And this is a table which gives you already an impression here with the percentage of world population in a very stable and stable democracies. And of course, that's the kind of evolutionary thinking here. But the relevance for us, what is the relevance for us, is that most of the PA research, public management, public policy research, up to now has been happening in these countries, in these democratic Western or liberal countries. And so we are actually doing research. The question is, how do ideas travel, and how can we impact other countries here? How can we create scientific dialogues, learn from others? We see increasingly that the number of top universities in the rankings come from non-democratic countries. And so the question is then, how does this impact our future research and our communities of PA, public management, public policy, political science and the like. I think it's for the next decades, for the future of how to organize a research agenda and a research community, we will see not a converging, but a diverging tendency. And I think that's an important element to be aware of. Next, please. I mentioned, and David mentioned it already, trust is a crucial, I'm relying on OECD data here. Trust is a crucial point here. I think trust is ultimately, I think, the performance indicator for a system. To the extent that people are trusting their own system, that is the real performance we should aim for. And obviously, this is a complex table here, but I have put Portugal here in front here. So I so this is the OECD average, and this is the Portuguese. So it's high, moderately high, neutral, low, or no trust, yellow. I'm just giving this as a context here to say there is a starting condition, there is a kind of starting position, sorry, and that's the context to look at. And you see, OECD didn't dare to put this in alphabetic, didn't dare to put it in from high to low here because that would be too political. So it's an alphabetical order here to have it more neutral to have this. So let me go to the 10 points. This is that was the appetizer, the trust agenda, ultimately. And I think 10 points. And I will first give you 10 tensions and possible responses. The word response is very deliberately chosen. It's not answers, but it's because we are wrestling with some of the questions and the challenges, and we don't really know. And we have to do research on this. So it's also the future of the research agenda itself here. I think it was already mentioned in the introduction, and I'm not going to mention all the, because I don't want you to leave this room in a depressive state, you know. I think we should have hope too and be convinced that we can make a positive difference, and that it makes a crucial difference that we are here studying and doing research and influencing policies as such here. But it is a fact, even in Europe, that populism and liberalism is there, the democratic backsliding, executive aggrandizement, this is political scientist terminology to say the executive power is really expanding beyond the power of the parliament and the judicial branch. So we have to take care of that too. And it's about, of course, guarding professional standards within the rule of law. And we see so this increased fragility and an undermining, and in some cases, some countries actively deconstructing the administrative state as an agenda, as an explicit agenda. And this impacts this is a simple drawing analytically to say, this impacts all the interactions, politicians, civil servants, and citizens / customers, which are there. And it impacts it in all the regimes we know of interactions, the typology of interactions between politicians and civil servants. So the first one is a kind of separation. It's for those that look at who know Yes Minister, the Yes Minister series, really the separation there. It happens also in the second condition, which is more the French system, where you have a kind of blurred elites, and where in some cases the government, members of the government, are studied at the École Nationale or at Polytechnique. And so there is a kind of interaction there. It happens also certainly in the third condition, which is more the US, with the spoil system, a spoil which is increasing, and where people are removed in function of a new government. In all these three conditions in our Western liberal democracies, these tensions happen. And so I apologize, this is perhaps too small print, but now I will ask you not just to trust the government, but also to trust me, that what is there on the screen here. It's actually a kind of legal approach. Can I ask how many lawyers are in the room? Don't be ashamed.
One.
One, okay. You see, I think, yes, one. Congratulations. We need, so sometimes when I give speeches, I say, we need more lawyers. And people come in the break to me, but Professor, really, are you serious? I said, yes, but of course the lawyers have to change. They have to change and to be social scientists too, you know, to be relevant in the way that law is used here. And the legal frames are crucial. We cannot just say rule of law is important and not have lawyers in the room. This is a kind of paradox or contradiction even to say that. And so the faculties of law should come to us, you know, we should go to them obviously too. And so the question is, how are our legal systems, how should they look in the future? How should they look like in the future? And I will not go into detail, just give you the variables of how we should think of how to reshape our legal systems for the future so that they are fit for purpose, And so it's about, well, our legal systems for the future, for the public sector, I mean, more private or more public? Will they be more national or international? These are the two dimensions here. And then there are two scenarios, a positive scenario and a negative scenario. You could call it a utopian or a dystopian scenario here. I never promised you a rose garden, I say to students. It's a tough walk. It's not a walk in the nice park here in Lisbon. And so you see, we could have in a negative one, if it's private and international, we have such a thing like governed by Google. And I think most of you are understanding this too. I don't want to be prosecuted by Google by mentioning Google now, but I mean, it's the other big companies which have turnover which is beyond even GDP of certain countries. So, and we don't have the legal frames for them to see. And there is a discussion between the American approach and the European approach on all. So all these things together. So there's a failed state. And I'm not going to all the components, but my point is we will have to think how to shape these legal frames for the future if we want to make sure that the rule of law is still relevant, and whether it's more private or public law, more national or international law. And then we have the possibility to have a positive or a negative version of that. Next, please. So what are the possible responses? And I said, I use the word response because it's also, I'm sharing, you know, we should have a common debate for the future. The answers are not there and not ready-made. We will have to move and produce the answers while we are walking into the fog to a certain extent. I think administrative responsibility, the whole issue of professional neutrality, David mentioned to it in the introduction too. It's a huge issue here in the issues. So how are we going to ensure rule of law, citizenship, public interest, social equity, and justice? I think the pluralistic democratic values. And I think bureaucracy, the word bureaucracy, when I say bureaucracy, most people would think, oh, that's a negative word. But for Max Weber, it was not a negative word. For Max Weber, it was an extremely positive word. And of course, Max Weber died in 1921. So that's, some things have happened since, right? And so, but here he changed the system to say, you know, to get rid of his own past and malfunctioning here. And of course, you know, if you look at the history over these 100 years, plus 100 years, well, we have had many paradigms of governance too, and the changes. And so instead of red tape as bureaucracy, I would like all of us to use green tape. Green is not the political color here, so it's another color. It's the positive tape we need here in a stable administration which is competent and which has its own legitimacy here. And so it's about rebalancing the executive power ultimately. And so we will have to have deliberation and participation and citizen engagement one way or another. And the question is how to organize this here. And so to continue some of the possible responsibilities, it's really about this re-equilibration between government as the executive, parliament, and the judicial becomes very important. It's about bringing in citizens in the res publica, so manage this res publica here. And probably, and of course, the resilience is crucial. Probably decentralization will be a crucial concept here. I think if you look at certain countries, I will not always refer to the US, obviously not, but the fact that there are strong states actually helps for the stability of a country. And so from that point of view, the fragility decreases when we have solid mechanisms of decentralization. And obviously that doesn't mean that we don't need a center of government. We need a center of government too, to steer and to keep things together in a legitimate way. But the decentralization becomes a very important point here. And I dare to say, even the emergency exit is far away, but I will still say it. I think decentralization is also a crucial agenda for Portugal to actually strengthen the local governments and the intermediate levels of government here in this country here. So that's the political agenda, the political time. We move to a second one. The second one enhances the first one. And the word polycrisis was already mentioned here. But it's about disruptions. It's really about destabilizing crises which are happening. And I don't have to tell you this in Portugal. I mean, you have been experiencing and surviving this in a very courageous way, whether it's financial or nature. And I must say that I admire Portugal for its resilience and the way things are handled, even if it's always can be better, of course. But it's the system quakes are coming. We know it will come. We don't know what the cause will be. We don't know when it will be, but we know that it will happen. And the question is, how can we anticipate and change our way of thinking? And I will mention some of the elements here. So I say cyber could be the case too. You have the electricity issue too here. So it's a very, the point is here that we will have to move from sequential thinking to simultaneous thinking. So sequential thinking is the old way of thinking. It means we have standard operating procedures, then we have a crisis, then we contain the crisis, and then we have the new normal. And then we have another crisis, etc., etc. It's sequential thinking. I think this is old stuff. We will have to move to another type, and it's important for the recovery agendas too, of course. It's the simultaneous thinking is we will have, for the future, we will have to ensure the standard operating procedures for education, health, security, all the standard operating procedures for the service delivery, and to see how simultaneously we will contain crises which disrupt this. And that requires a totally different back office. across different levels of government. It implies a totally different thinking of allocating people, budgets, organizational competences, sharing information, totally different from the sequential thinking. We have to go to the simultaneous thing. And so I'm very happy that Professor Gallego is also in the room here, and we developed this table here. So it's three situations which we will have to combine for the future. At this moment, we only combine two of them. The first one is a classical policy administration. I mean, Weber loved this. And as I said, Weber has changed too, of course, and luckily. But it's about an environment which is relatively stable, knowledge which is risky. We can calculate the probabilities. There is a simple interdependence, causality, which we can figure out. And the solution, the definition of solution is clear and accepted. We have moved to VUCA. I'm sure most of you will know VUCA, the VUCA system, where the environment is volatile, where the knowledge is uncertain, where the interdependencies are complex, and where the solution is ambiguous. Okay, I think we managed that reasonably well. Reasonably well. Not perfect, but we were able to train operations for this, whether it's fire or water or some other catastrophes, health, of course. I think reasonably we train our civil servants and our services on operations and how to work together. I think that's relatively well in Europe. But we are going to a third category, which is totally different. And it's the COVID is an example of this here. And of course, you have experienced this electricity collapse, the big fires you have. This is really disrupting. This is system quake. It's really, the system is like an earthquake. It's a system quake. And so it means the environment is turbulent and disruptive. The knowledge is oscillating and unpredictable. We actually don't know what's happening and how it's happening. The interdependence, it's domino. Policy dominoes are falling. Think of COVID. The health pushed the economy, the mobility, all the policy fields were falling apart, and we had to go in lockdowns because that was like the safest to say, stay where you are, close your eyes. And the solution, what is a solution? There is discussion. It's opposed, disputed, wicked. The wicked problems create wicked solutions, and the experts are being blamed. That's a third category. We have to be prepared for the combination of the three. We have so far been able to combine two of them, but the third, we don't have the legal framework, we don't have the back office to share and to be flexible in people, infrastructure, allocation of machinery, data, and all of that. We are not prepared for that, and we have to do that. It requires another type of training, not on operations, but on trust. We will have to train people to work together and to trust one another, trust within the public sector. That's a crucial point. Next, please. Now, I used some data on, I'm sorry, this is too small for the backbenchers. The red dot is OECD average, the blue dot is Portugal. All right, I think you have an impression approximately. So government is ready to protect lives in an emergency. OECD average, Portuguese data. I will do the cherry picking here. Eh? Government explains the impact of reforms. OECD, Portugal. Government takes decisions based on evidence. OECD, Portugal. Politicians would refuse private sector jobs in return for political favors. OECD, Portugal. Okay, I will not comment on this. And you may dispute on these numbers, but these numbers are accepted and are available. And it gives a kind of situation of how Portugal is benchmarked within the OECD, and of course the OECD is a stretch from Japan to Mexico, so it's quite varied average. The word average could be misleading here, but nevertheless, it becomes a fact which we have to take into account. Next, please. So what are possible responses on this crisis and turbulence, the turbulence issue? Well, I think capacity is important. Public sector capacity is important. The new public management has actually cut capacity, and they have reframed certain words. It's a new speak because investment became cost, buffers, and became redundancy. And so it became actually another type of terminology to legitimize cuts. It's very clear that those that were better performing in the COVID crisis were those that have had less budget cuts in hospitals, for example, or in the health system as such. Yeah, that's important. The second possible response is foresight and expertise. I think we will have to invest in knowledge on the future. So the foresight is a crucial element to professionalize it, not a kind of nice to have thing. Let's look a bit in the future. No, it should be systematic. We need crisis leadership. This is different from leadership in standard operating procedures and classical service delivery. Crisis leadership is a totally different game. And so it's not necessarily the same people too. We have to mobilize society, and because the public sector is not able to solve it yet. I think someone disagrees. Yeah. We have to accept hybridity. So hierarchies, markets, and networks, I will come back to that. That's a bit of a technical word, too, but hybridity is difficult. It's not easy to explain, but we need this. And, you know, we have to look and prepare the human AI interaction. AI, for some it's utopia, for some it's dystopia. So it's unclear what will happen here, but it's certainly a fact that comes, and we will have to take it into account. Next, please. Politics, turbulence, and disruption. Third point, the citizen-state interaction. Given that we have these, how is this interaction with citizens here? Well, we see an increased diversity of population. In the Netherlands, they talk about hyperdiversity. And I think we also see the skepticism. I'm not using the word trust here, but the trust is, of course, also an element. It's the distrust of expertise and evidence-based issues here too. Alternative truths. So when we say alternative truths, or it means we know what the truth is, right? Failing classical communications. I think communication is, we have to interact also with the communication departments. And the COVID case was very clear on that. We have missed communication because we were focusing on a kind of average type of citizen, which we know from the past. The feeling of exclusion in society is immense. It's immense, and we should not underestimate that. And it impacts elections as protests. Yes. Oh.
It doesn't show the graphic or the table. It says it cannot be displayed.
Oh, that's a pity.
Yes.
That's a crucial
Slide. Let me just.
I will come back to this. It's actually the differentiation within the Portuguese society on male, female, on pro-government or not pro-government, the trust differences. It's do you have this? Can you check it?
What about the file? About the
No, I think it's about
no.
the file because
Can you go to my
Está em imagem na internet.
Iscala non ha cosa di
This is linked to internet, isn't it?
can you take mine?
Yes, I can.
Can you take mine? Portugal?
Lisbon?
Yes. Yes. And now see, is it futures? Do you see futures?
Maybe 2024. No.
Can you go one back?
Yes.
Is Portugal here? No. Yes, Portugal. Yes. Of course, yes. Special lecture. Futures.
No.
Futures. Yes.
On the problem with the content. Let me just leave. And then open yours.
as nossas desculpas, ficamos de uma
Can I attempt to repair the
Yeah.
presentation? No. They cannot. I think something is not right. It was
Can you have the first one?
Mhm.
Yeah. Can you go? Yes, this one.
This one.
Yeah.
Okay.
We show
So
this one.
I will just share.
Yes, it's solved. It's solved.
So, vamos só uns segundos.
No, it's solved. Sorry.
Just a few seconds, I would say, because I said minutes and it was seconds.
Yes.
Right, sorry.
Okay, this is a slide we needed. So it's the Portuguese citizen state variations and the differences. So it's really, the left side is OECD, the right side is Portugal. And it shows here the political agency gap. So it actually shows that if you are, this is about trust levels. Huh? So age is almost not differentiated. So 50 years or older and younger than 50, they have less trust. This is the OECD, this is Portugal. Gender, the black, this is male, and when female, Portugal, male and female. Educational gap, higher level of education. In OECD, the trust is here, and lower level of education is here. For Portugal, this is the situation. Financial concerns, OECD, so people without concerns are here, and with concerns are here. In Portugal, it's this interaction. Partisans, they voted for a party in power, OECD here, and not voting for power parties or parties in power here. In Portugal, this is the difference here. And then people that say, we think we have a say in, so average is here. We have no say, so it's the exclusion is here. And for Portugal, it's even lower than in the OECD. This actually shows that the trust levels which we show and have, if it's only one figure, it's a bit misleading because you have to look at these divergence situations within a country. There is one analysis that is not presented here. It's the ethnic variation here. And so the ethnicity becomes also an element of diverging trust levels here. So what are the possible responses for that? I think we certainly have to accept diversity. I mean, it would be a bit odd to say, let's get rid of diversity. Although we see that in China, the last legislation was to exclude ethnic diversity. We have to combine types of communication because different pockets in society need different types of communication. And we have to emphasize the common grounds. It's a kind of civic education which we need in society, starting probably in primary school, and to do that. It also means that the interaction with citizens as users of services, we need to reinvent the street-level bureaucrats in a different way for the frontline service delivery. And we have to emphasize access to services. There's a huge, a large number of people that feel excluded from services. OECD defines access in 3 ways. There is the informational access, there is the financial access, and there is the geographical access. And the 3 are very important to keep an eye on because people feel increasingly excluded in regular service delivery. OECD has done the studies for education, health, and justice. So it's a very important part to feel included. 4th point, the futures of administrating the state. So we have politics, we have the turbulence, citizens' interactions, and now how should we administer the state? That's a tough one. That's a tough one, and you will see that the responses are very weak, which I can generate here for the debate here. It's about the tension between private value and public value. It's about deregulation or re-regulation or regulation or re-regulation, the whole political debate on this here. It's about levels of government. Where should we do what? It's a very fundamental debate because the trust correlates with the levels here, the trust differences. And then it's, of course, the tensions between organizations in the public sector markets and networks. So the possible responses, and you will see this is a very weak part of the presentation because there's not much research that is very convincing on this. Regulatory states. So some of the experts say we will have to move to regulation 2.0. Why not 10.0? And what does it mean 2.0? So for me, this is not convincing so far. We need to look at deliberative and participatory governance. So vertically, it's between the levels of government, and horizontally, it's the public sector, the private sector, and NGOs, which is difficult to organize. And again, the hybridity. Again, I apologize for, well, I don't apologize for the word. The word is relevant. But the question is, what does it really mean? How can we touch hybridity? I think that's not very clear. How is it differentiated according to the content of the policy fields? Because education is different from health, from environment, etc. That brings us to futures to manage the civil service. That's a tough cookie too. We see a growing involvement of the private sector in the public sphere of government, whether it's strategies that are designed, law firms that write the legislation, consultancies, they take over the brains of the think tanks within the public sector, the implementation, the contracting out, the legal frames. So there's a huge impact of the private sector in the public sector, using private law in the public sphere too. There's also the flexibility. So tenure is decreased and the flexibility. People are moving, always on the move. And are moving so fast that we lose our memory, our institutional memory. And that creates dysfunctional flexibility. A very important, there is research on that, how merit is being replaced as a criterion by loyalty. Merit is being replaced by loyalty. And that's a very tricky one. So the increased loyalty leads to another type of bureaucracy. And so how can we respond to that? Again, this is a tough one. Can we look in different ways to flexibility? Is it possible to define degrees of political responsiveness? To what extent can we be responsive as civil servants? It's also, yes, we need to perhaps have legal protections to say merit is necessary but not sufficient, and we need a kind of democratic rule of law based requirement too for civil servants to operate. Sixth point is the digital governance. And I mentioned already the utopians and the dystopians, right? It's a general, I mean, this is a bit rhetorical to put it this way, of course, because it's work in progress. But we have to make sure there is, there is not too much of a dual society. People are excluded again because of the digital agenda. And each solution creates new problems. So we have to anticipate this too, especially in a societal context. The impact on the back offices will be immense, potentially. And I think we are moving to another totally different type of data governance. So when we look at digital projects, so people work on projects, it has been disciplinary, very sequential, like dominoes. First, you have the engineers, and the engineers say, we have the solutions. Then come the lawyers to say, wait, your solutions create problems. Then suppose the lawyers find solutions. They're not always have the mindset to find solutions. But suppose then the economists come in. They say, but who will pay for this? There's the finance, the investment, and then the services itself. So then the economic models, the business models come into the game there. And then the people come to say, and now we have to do it on the field and say, we surrender. We don't know how to do it. So you see kind of sequential, disciplinary driven thing. So we have to move. The whole, show the whole, yeah, one more. Yes. So we have to move again from sequential to simultaneous. So we need project groups where the lawyers and the engineers and the economists and the service providers are all sitting together, which is, of course, creates a communication chaos, but you have to have then kind of solid, if you want to have this output, you will have to have a different type of project to bring in the digital agenda. And here it's based on the knowledge of people, so the disciplinary knowledge of people, which is crucial here. So the future will be, I think, as follows. We are moving from organizations with databases which are connected or not connected. We are moving to the right hand of the scheme, a total Copernican change. The focus and the essence is not the organizations. The focus and the essence will be the databases. We will move from organizations with databases which are connected or not connected to connected databases with organizations. And these organizations can be private, public, not-for-profit, and they will use these communicating and interacting databases. And that's a totally different design. That's a totally different concept of our public sphere. it means levels of government disappear. Not the front office, but the back office will disappear because it's connected. And the question is, how are we going to govern this? That will be the future. We will also need legal frames for this to allocate responsibility and accountability. Audits will be important in this case here. So we need a kind of demand-driven supply, not a supply-driven, because now it's supply-driven. We have this, so we have to use it. No, it's the other way around. What do we need? And then we try to find it. We have to look for the cost-benefit analysis too, of course, and make sure we can expand the benefits here. The different professions, I mentioned that, interactively and simultaneously. And we need to start to think in terms of databases with organizations rather than organizations with disconnected databases. And that's so the essence of the public sector in, let's say, 30, 40 years will not be the organizations, it will be the databases. And we have to redefine responsibility and accountability. That's easily said, that's absolutely difficult to say. 7 points. Performance. We will have to rethink performance too, also in the context of these databases. It's not the performance of the organizations, it's the performance of the databases. So that's also a different logic which we have to include. I'm not going to completely elaborate on that. I just will say 2 things here. Performance, when I say performance, you think of results of service delivery and effects of policies. That's absolutely right. That's a thing to do here. But if you think of the trust issue, to link performance with trust, then you will notice that it's not only because you deliver good services that people will trust, it's also because you have behaved in an appropriate way. Appropriateness becomes a crucial element for trust. And so an appropriate way to deliver services, to deliver policies, becomes a crucial element in the future. And we will have to include this. And there are some examples. New public management. I'm sure you have been brainwashed with new public management, I suppose. So you look okay, I must say. But so the new public management has been exaggerating the service delivery itself, and actually has lost its links in some countries. I will mention the countries with appropriateness. So in some countries, the Netherlands and Australia, to be very clear, they have had scandals where the administration behaved in an inappropriate way. That means denying services to citizens, denying the right for citizens to be a part of the service delivery, motivated by the efficiency of the services. Say it's easier not to deliver the services. Even if you have right to this here. So there's the tension between the delivery and appropriate service delivery here. And it has resulted in scandals which really impacted the governance itself in the Netherlands, parliamentary debates on why did we do this? Because there is a rule of law and there are citizen rights here. Again, I'm sorry to, I hope you don't get nightmares of these graphs now, because the gaps are actually larger in this scheme here. These are official OECD data. So it's satisfaction with the health system. So red is OECD and blue is Portugal. Satisfaction with the educational system. Satisfaction with administrative services. Information on administrative procedures is easy to find. Government uses personal data legitimately. My application for government benefits would be treated fairly. Okay, I want, because I told you I don't want you to leave depressed here, but But there is work to do. That's the positive part of the agenda. So there's a whole agenda, and again, I won't elaborate in detail here. We will have to rethink our way we are measuring performance, how we use it in our documents for debates, and how we use it to make decisions. It will have to be amended and upgraded. And of course, it's not just dynamic. We will have to include trust as an element of performance, which is not always the case in organizations. Appropriateness indicators. You should know that in Government at a Glance, so the main publication of OECD, when you look at the history of the indicators, the proportion, it moved from approximately 20% of the indicators were on appropriateness. Now we are at 50% of the indicators are on appropriateness. So it becomes very important. Obviously, digital and AI, how do we measure the performance of digital and AI? So it's not an obvious thing always to do. And I think performance is crucial, and it's a bit, how shall I say? When I ask you who is against performance, probably nobody's against performance. Who is against quality? Nobody's against quality. So it means we all have different labels and content for that here. And it becomes a kind of difficult agenda in some cases, because if you look at performance, the benefits, the cost is clear, we measure it. The allocation, someone has to pay for the measurement and the use. It's unconditional, it's in monetary terms. The benefits are, well, we work better, where we are more accountable, well, we take better decisions. So it's much more intangible, and it's conditional depending on the use and so on. So there's a kind of natural unbalance between the cost and the benefits when you look at the performance agenda here, which doesn't mean we shouldn't do it. I think we have to upgrade and emphasize the benefits of the performance information systems. 8, we're almost there. The governance space. How do we fill the governance space? Having said all what I have said so far, I think the fundamental question for the future is, what is the main driver of our system? And with main driver, I mean not just in proportions or volumes, but also who is driving the other parts in the space. And the space consists of 3 vectors. Hierarchy, which is the public sector, the state, with all its public sector organization. The market, M stands for market, and N stands for networks. There are 2 types of networks in general. You have the digital networks and the social networks, right? So the question is, who is really in charge, ultimately? And to be in charge means also who is regulating the 2 others. But that's the point. New public management. You must have heard of it. New public management is the market. Marketized public services, not just the share of the market, but also the marketization within the public sector. And it's the market that will regulate the hierarchies and the networks. New public management. New public governance. It's the networks. The networks drive the hierarchies and the markets. The digital networks, for example. The digital networks, the platforms, those that own these databases, they drive the hierarchies and the markets. It becomes new public governance, especially in the digital era. Pollitt and I have developed this concept of the neo-Weberian state. The neo-Weberian. So not Weber, as I said, he died in 1921, but so it's neo-Weberian. It means within a democracy and the rule of law, with participatory and collaborative governance. the upgrading of it. That regulates the market and the networks. So these are three different ways to fill the governance space. This is a normative question, of course. You know, normally I do a survey to say who prefers what. And you have the three options. It has to do with culture too. I'm sure you have heard of Hofstede. I put Brazil, Portugal, and the United Kingdom. So it's just to say the purpose of this graph is to actually say, don't copy paste blindly other models. Stay Portuguese, please. Stay Portuguese. But try to think and make something compatible with your cultural identity. That's the point. It has to do with power distance. Again, I'm not going to fully expand here, but you see between Brazil and Portugal, there are differences, let alone the UK. Who wants to go to the UK? So, individualism, uncertainty avoidance, long-term orientations. So I'm not going to expand on it. I just want to show you the graphs are clear. Be careful, study other, of course you have to look at other countries. Not only to see what you could do, but also to see what you should not do. So it's very clear there too. 9, futures, trust. Trust is trust of society in the public sector. There's trust of the public sector in society. There's trust within the public sector. And we have to take that into account. What are the trust drivers? Competence, ability, benevolence, kind of goodwill, integrity, corruption, fraud, and participation. For a long time, the paradigms on trust research only had 3 of them. Ability, benevolence, and integrity. Are you competent? I trust you. Do you have goodwill? I trust you. Are you not corrupt? I trust you. And the OECD surveys on trust, and in general, the research now says we actually have to add a 4th dimension. It's quite, let's say, last 10 years that this has added. It's participation. It's the feeling that people say, I belong to they take care of, they listen to me. I'm not excluded. And participation has 3 stages for the OECD. It's inform, consult, engage. It's a kind of 3-step movement there. The participation becomes a crucial element, especially the figures show it very clearly at local government. The more there is participation and people have the feeling they are taken into account, the higher the trust. But that's an important element here. Again, this is trust in different Portuguese institutions. And the yellow dots are the OECD average. And it's Portugal 21 and Portugal 23. Police, older people, international organizations, courts, national civil service, regional, news, local government, regional, national, parliament, political parties. Okay. We don't have to overestimate this here, and it's always difficult. It's useful to compare in time. It's a bit tricky to compare with an average, but at least it's something we have to take into account. Final, to summarize the futures, what could we do? And some are a bit abstract sentences here. And it has a normative flavor here too. As I said, the framework is a liberal democracy with the rule of law, it's not kind of, a rule of law based context. We need to enhance and upgrade our representative democracy with deliberative governance and democracy. We have to move to trust governance and use collaborative governance, which is the participation agenda. We have to rethink the checks and the balances in our systems because the executive power is now too strong. We have to combine consequences, which is the results, and appropriateness, because they both impact trust. I propose the neo-Weberian state, not new public management and not new public governance as a model. But that's also an ideological normative question. We have to move from sequential to simultaneously delivery and crisis governance. We have to move to a thinking where databases are the essence of the public sector. We have to think the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, local 11, 16, and 17. We still have time till 2030, but everything is disrupted by what's happening, the fires in the world. And then there are two which have to do with, let's say, thinking about the future, also within universities, but also within the public sector. We need comparative research and scientific dialogue, also with the fragile and the non-Western systems. We cannot live in a ghetto and in a bubble. We have to know what's going on and have this interaction. And 10, we need permanent, dynamic, and forward-rolling future strategies for our public sector and our public administration. This is a commercial, but you can download it for free. So that's the good news. I invite you to download. You can go to the website. It's a book published by Leuven University Press. You can download it for free. And oh, you have it already, okay. Most of what I have said is in the book, but I have said more now than it is in the book. That's part of the commercial. This is also a commercial, but unfortunately it's not. It's Routledge, so it's you can go there. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Gert Bukeert, for this very interesting presentation and insightful and thoughtful provocation also, sometimes, as usual. It is very honor to receive your thoughts and shares with our community, although many times, unfortunately, Portugal is not so well in the figures. But that also encourages us to improve and to take some responsibility for the future. So we have now some time for questions and answers. We can begin here in the audience. So we have 1, 2 already. Okay. I would like just to ask you to briefly introduce yourself and then to pose your question very fast and do a brief comment if you want, but be really.
Hi, I'm Sonia Funach, and thank you so much for being here with us. I'm a student for the doctorship in public administration, and my supervisor is Professor David. I'm very glad to be here, hearing your so wise words and thoughts, and some kind of challenging thoughts. And I have a question for you. So you argued that you argue that trust is a performance indicator for a system. So my research suggests something more unsettling, I think, that administrative burden functions as a trust-destroying mechanism that operates silently below the threshold of political visibility and leaves a durable scar on civic behavior long after the original failure is forgotten. So, if trust is the ultimate performance indicator, should we not then treat administrative friction as the primary performance risk? And design governance instruments with burden minimization as a hard technical constraint. rather than a negotiable political outcome. And if so, does this require public administration to develop a new class of leading indicators of systemic failure, ones that measure the erosion of trust before it manifests as non-compliance? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sonia.
Master student, and my English is very bad. I make some notes. If trust depends on many factors beyond the government control, how should public administrations define success in terms of governance and performance? I mean, how far can public sector reforms realistically go in rebuilding trust?
Okay, thank you. In this first round, I think we can have one of the online questions, and then I give you the floor again, Garrett. So online, there is a person that posed the question, how can we decentralize? It is a general question, but I will give it to you also. How can we decentralize and build society's trust in a regional public system of an autonomous region? I think this person is from a regional administration in Portugal, probably from NASA. Please.
Yes. But thank you for the three questions already, which are at the core of what I have been talking about. And obviously, I could have a whole speech on trust itself, and I think it's a fair. The remarks are fair to say, you know, it was the failure, and trust is beyond the control of the public sector. Now, let me first elaborate a bit on trust to qualify what I have said, and hopefully to give evidence in response to your right concerns. First of all, trust is alpha and omega. It's at the beginning and it's at the end. So it's not a simple causal model where you do something and then there is trust. It's this is not the case. And that's why scientifically it's difficult to investigate, because it's cause and effect at the same time. And so it's a kind of circular reasoning. So that's the first qualification, let's say, put both of your relevant remarks into context. That's the first thing. The second thing is there are different levels of trust. Normally I work with the categories micro, meso, and macro trust. Micro trust is at the service delivery itself. You put a letter in the post box and you trust it will arrive. Meso is I trust the unemployment policy. You know, I take courses and I'm retrained, and so the policy to bring people to the job market or the environmental measures taken, it's a policy, it's a meso level. And then you have the macro level, which is actually the most intangible one. Do you trust the judicial system? In Belgium is, do you trust the king? It's not the person, it's the office of the king, the head of the state. So and so these are the three levels. These three levels are not connected. They have their own dynamics. So you cannot say the sum of the micros leads to the meso and the sum of the mesos leads to the macro trust. That's not the case. You have different mechanisms at the micro level, at the meso level, and at the macro. So that's a second point of qualification. A third one is the models we use in trust. there are actually two major schools. One school says it's a continuum of trust and distrust. It's a line and it moves. The second, and I belong to the second school, is to say it's two things. You have the trust and you have distrust. And you can simultaneously trust and distrust. I will give an example. During the financial crisis, you left your money in the bank, you distrust the banks, but you have to trust them. So simultaneously, we did research in the Flemish administration to see. So it's possible to combine trust and distrust at the same time, and because it's different mechanisms. That's another detail. The fourth remark is it's a language issue actually, and it has a complex terminology issue. It's confidence and trust. In English, we speak, well, I'm not anglophone, but confidence and trust. And in many languages, we do not distinguish between these two words. And so trust is a relational issue. It's based on relations. It can be a person with another person, it can be a person with an organization, it can be an organization with an organization. You trust the other organization. Confidence is a kind of context. The context of confidence is important. It becomes a culture of confidence too. And so the link between trust and confidence, it could also be distrust or confidence. And we also have to take care to say, increasingly, instead of a context of confidence, we are moving to a context of fear. Fear. Angst. Fear. And so it has been a political strategy in certain countries to actually shift to fear. And then the question is, in the context of fear, how is trust and distrust positioned? Because you always need some level of trust and some levels of distrust. And the question is, what is the importance of the context of confidence and the context of fear? And so the two questions on trust are actually related to say, you know, if you have failures, people forget about that. And there are many examples of that. It's in many cases, people continue to trust because there is no alternative. There's no alternative, and they say, what should we do? And the response, it's actually, how do people respond to vulnerability? It's about vulnerability is the question. The question. People feel vulnerable, and then you have to trust. Hirschman, the American theoretician, Hirschman said there are three ways to respond for citizens. It's exit, voice, and loyalty. Exit, voice, and loyalty. Exit means it can be hooliganism, it can be leaving the country, it can be, you know, terrorism. It's exit. Voice is protest, and loyalty is okay. You do, and loyalty implies it's a kind of blind trust. It's the blind trust. And so I'm just putting a broader scenery of concepts to qualify there. And so your point is that this is beyond control of, you know, trust in the government, and it's beyond the control of it. In a way, you are right. And so certainly the macro trust and the meso trust to a certain extent too. The micro trust is more manageable because it's linked to service delivery here. And I think we did correlations in our trust research, and we analyzed what happened in society. I will give two examples which may be a bit shocking to say. after football game and the country won, trust increased. The trust figures after a major football, everybody waving the Portuguese flag or the Belgian flag, which is even more shocking except for some bar, not for me, but the trust increases, jumps up, but then it falls back quite quickly. That's beyond control. But then you say, let's invest in football. Some people do, huh? Buy chests, brilliant plays. The Romans do it very well. And then, so the second thing was when there was a big company collapsing with huge people fired, immediately the trust levels dropped. And when there was positive news, so the correlation between the trust in the economy as a kind of welfare and well-being agenda correlated to the trust in government. And so this is a kind of macro link, of course, to say to what extent does the government and the whole public sector makes a difference to society? Is there a perception that there is a positive difference, that the public sector makes a difference? And I'll give one anecdote and then I go to the other question. I think the only country where elections were not around decreasing the taxation, a country where they said, we actually don't mind paying higher taxes, but we want good service delivery. It was Sweden. So in Sweden, there were elections to say, actually, we don't want this rat race to the bottom for the taxes. We want to pay high taxes, but we don't. So, and so the issue, the agenda of always lowering services, lowering taxes, impacts the capacity of the public sector and ultimately makes people excluded and impacts trust. So there's a kind of linkage to say it's beyond control. Ultimately, yes, if you assume a one-to-one relationship, but at the macro level, there is certainly a link. And the more you go to the micro level, the more impact you have. But you cannot add all the macros and that results to the mesos and all the mesos add into the macro. That's not how it works. So that's what you have to take into account. On the decentralization issue, it's also linked to trust. In the liberal democracies, the trust in central government is lower than in, let's say, regional government, and trust in regional government is lower than trust in local government, in liberal democracies. It's not always the case, of course, because decentralization, you have to have the capacity in local government too. So, talking to the person online here, if you decentralize, in some countries, we have seen processes of moving competence to local government, but not moving sufficient resources to local government, which was like a hidden saving strategy from central government. Now, if you move more competences than resources and capacity, you create an impossible situation for local governments, and you are not able to deliver to the citizens. And so that creates a very tricky situation to weaken actually your local governments for saving matters. And it could impact the trust levels, even if in principle, decentralization and decentralizing should enhance the trust levels, because trust levels at local government are traditionally higher in liberal democracies than in other levels of government. But the condition is that you give sufficient capacity to local government to run its local government and have the contacts with the citizens. So then you can decentralize and build trust at the same time.
Thank you, Garrett. This will be a huge debate in Portugal regarding the transfer of competences to local municipalities. So it is on our agenda also. So now we have time for a second round. Okay. Ines, if you don't mind. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Marcia. I'm a PhD student in the public administration. Well, let's talk about data and data protection. My question is, could global or cross-government, cross-platforms, AA data platform, enhance public value, or do they risk creating new forms of centralized control? That's my question.
I'm Gabriela, I'm a PhD student in public administration, and I would like to know how capacity dynamic influences the public institutions, as well which factors can be used to measure the capacity dynamic.
I would just, bring in a short time, I'm a PhD student, with my colleagues. I just want to compliment your question very much, Marcia, because my background is technology and AI. So I will push the question more for AI. So what is the role of innovation in the future of public sector? And I'm just surprised to see that AI was in the turbulent. So I think AI will have a huge, if I saw it correctly. So you consider that AI will have a huge impact in the way we manage public sector, and also regarding to trust authorities, what is also the role of accountability and transparency, right? Because we cannot also talk about trust without taking into account the accountability and transparency. Thank you very much.
Okay. I would say in another round, we have also some questions online, and then a final round to review, if you don't mind. So we also have a question from a user online, Safamar, that asked if could we further elaborate on the factors that may be contributing to the replacement of merit-based principles by loyalty in public administration. And I would also pose the other question online. There are many. There is a great deal of emphasis connected with AI also on AI among policymakers as a kind of panacea for everything. Could this illusion, which creates the impression of a quick and simple answers to complex problems, be counterproductive? And I would say that we'll do a final round for the final questions.
Okay, so the data, capacity, innovation, merit, so the word data is of course a generic word. And the origin of the data is the important one. I think if you look so far, how did we handle data? There are financial and non-financial data. That's one distinction we make. So we treat data differently according to our financial or non-financial. And we have created institutions to check for the validity, the reliability, and the use of data and how to handle them. We have created statistical offices to create data, to handle data, and there's a whole machinery for comparing data in a statistical context. We have accountants that look and auditors that look at financial data, and that also has been important to look at, to see are they reliable and valid to be used. We have combined these two, the financial and the non-financial data, which has caused huge tensions between statistical offices and audit offices. It has created clash in norms and how to handle this. What we see now is the expansion of all these data, and they become a kind of in a shared ownership here. And I think I will not be able to answer your question, but I can only respond to say how it can impact the way we use data, how it impacts the functioning of the public sector. I will give an example. License numbers. And the cities are full of cameras, huh? to detect license numbers, which is a database of the license numbers. When the license numbers were only useful to pay taxes for your car, it was a single organization. And in some countries, it was even privatized because it was a single organization, only linked to one tax purpose, to pay the taxes of your car. And so it happened that it was privatized to get your license number. The situation now is totally different. We use license numbers and detection. The police uses it for security reasons. The environmental department uses it because we have low emission zones in cities, low emission zones. It's used to monitor traffic and the intensity of traffic, to anticipate jams and all kinds of. So you see the number of users has been expanding. It's the same data, but they have been expanded in the use. So the service delivery has increased. It has impacted the policies, you know, low emission zones in cities and so on. So new types of services and new types of policy are moved there. So you see, it's not just we have more data, but we have the same data used for more things. And that's a different governance question here, which brings us to the question of who is ultimately responsible and accountable for this. So, because that's a public administration question, it's a governance question. So the discussion on data and databases and algorithms, and not even talking about giving subventions to people based on profiling and so on, but so just the license numbers is a good case to say we have to rethink and it's it proves for that my point that I have made. We have moved from an organization with a database of license numbers to a database of license numbers which is connected to other issues used by organizations, and that requires a totally different governance issue. And so from that point of view, the public value of data, even when they are publicly or privately owned, becomes very important. And we have to rethink the whole system from the point of view of responsibility and accountability, which was mentioned through transparency and accountability too as a crucial question. And that brings me to the innovation issue. And I think the public sector, and obviously the private sector, is innovating too, and exploring the borderlines of what is legally possible there. But I think it's a responsibility of the public sector to have infant industries. It's the classical economic theory of infant industries, to say we have to push this and try to spread it in a regulated way. The huge challenges here, how much experimentation can we afford? Experimentation, it's very tricky to experiment with societies. So the question is, and then we come to artificial intelligence, which is not my field of expertise. I think I feel very humble and modest here to say something. I think I'm already courageous when I say something about human intelligence. That's about artificial intelligence. But human intelligence is tricky too in its own way. So I think the responsibility of our public sector and the protection of citizens becomes actually you see I can't even complete my sentences properly, so I probably need ChatGPT to finalize my speech here, but and then we could start hallucinating. So I think there is a lot of literature on innovation, and I think I will tell you one element on the importance for the public sector to innovate and to allow innovation for the private sector. We did research on innovation, and it was actually a very disturbing type of research, because it was based on the CAF Common Assessment Framework and the innovations in the public sector. So sometimes in the public sector, the innovation is to stop doing things. It's the other way around, not to do it, but to stop doing things. And so there were conferences on innovations, which in the public sector. And we have listed them, and then we went like 3, 4, 5 years later, we went back to these organizations to look for these innovations, what happened to these innovations. The shocking thing was that most of the people didn't even remember that happened. So, and it was not a question of Alzheimer or of amnesia of the organization or of the civil servants. It was just that it disappeared. It disappeared. And then it can disappear with a whole model. We have a whole model. It disappeared because it was absorbed by standard operating procedures. That was a possibility. The other was, it was a bad thing, and we had to get rid of it. And the other thing was, it floated somewhere and nobody was aware of that. So the response rate was high, but the results of that research were a bit shocking. So from then on, I'm a bit cautious to use the word innovation. That's actually my point. It's a very expensive word, and we have to be economic with this word, innovation, and to make it very tangible and try to look at processes of, concrete, what is really changing. Is it changing procedures? Is it changing a culture? Is it changing standards? And then it comes to learning. So it comes to the other element of the debate of accountability. So what we found out was innovations had a longer lifetime when there was a learning culture. That means you share information, you're willing to share information, which is not obviously in the public sector. That has to do with the quality of feedback mechanisms. So you need actually fast feedback mechanisms. When something goes wrong, that you can stop fast. The sooner you stop a bad innovation, the better. So you need very effective feedback mechanisms. And you have to combine it with learning, which is sharing experiences. And the third was accountability. You tell people what you have done and why you have done it. A culture of accountability. So feedback, learning, and accountability were the crucial elements to keep the innovations. For those that we found that. And so artificial intelligence is part of this here. But it's beyond, because it's not just at the level of activities, it's at the level of a system. It's systemic. And we don't have we still don't know in which direction we have to shape our legal frameworks to organize responsibility and accountability systems to not to lose control. So that's my, let's say, wicked answer. On the merit and loyalty issue, I think I must say, I think hopefully there, there is evidence, obviously, that if you only score on loyalty and you have no merit, that the system ultimately will become ineffective. But then, of course, you could think of leaders that do not mind ineffective systems. That's also a reality, unfortunately. And so we can only hope that if, and the score system is based on loyalty, but then we should hope that there is that quality of leadership to say the first criterion is loyalty, but the second at the level of the first one is also competences. And that's the only way out, I think, to say, because merit without loyalty, the question is loyalty to what? Is it to a person or is it to a legal system here? And a kind of democratic institutions. We have to be more precise loyalty to what? And if we cannot exclude loyalty as a crucial principle, let's hope that the leadership is aware that they have a benefit to include merit.
Thank you, Professor Gert. Now, as promised, the last round.
My name is Joanna, I'm a PhD student in public administration, and my research focuses on the implementation of the AI Act in Portuguese public administration. In the context of the tension between continuity and transformation, I would like to ask whether increasing regulation of AI may lead public administration to focus more on compliance than on innovation, and whether this could limit the transformation that regulation aims to promote. Thank you.
More questions? Okay, Barbara.
Hello, my name is Barbara Lima. I'm also a PhD student of public administration. You mentioned the cost benefits analysis and its importance. In the healthcare systems, it will be enough, or there will be room for the value-based healthcare and other ways to measure public value?
Wow, we have finished. So one more question, if there is the one in the room that wants to pose the question. One.
Hello, my name is Maria Asensio. I'm a teacher of a master's degree and PhD programs. My question is concerning the students. To what extent the evidence-based analysis is important for those that want to analyze all these reforms in a comparative study? Another question. You talk about trust, but concerning methodology, is it a problem of endogeneity? How can we resolve the problem of endogeneity? Because we do not know to what extent, which is the cause. Because you say there is a relational, trust is relational, but which is the cause of lack of trust? This is my question.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. So I will have from those that we are receiving one more question online. Being the database is so relevant for good governance, democracy, and trust, how can we invert the power of several data providers and AI private tools that now overcome public data warehouse?
Okay, we'll start with the last one. Since it's a kind of professional or even brutal answer, I think because there is indeed the power, you know, well, I think then let's nationalize it.
Wow.
Let's nationalize it. So I repeat it again, you know? And of course, that will cause other problems. I'm aware of that. But sometimes you have to move from problem to problem. It's a Belgian answer. I think the issue of continuity and transformation and the whole issue of regulation and, you know, compliance. I mean, this is a very relevant question again. I'm very happy that Dr. Students asks such good questions. So it's a pleasure to wrestle with these answers. I think we should not confuse continuity with stability. I think there is a kind of dynamic stability too, and it's a trade-off ultimately, and we will never be able to avoid disruption and crisis. We just have to have the systemic capacity to contain or to handle them. And so, and that's why we have to adjust our legal systems, because to be forced to comply with legal systems which are outdated, that's actually very problematic, because they become irrelevant and dysfunctional. And that's why I think we should help the lawyers to develop these systems and encourage them to do that. And I think it will lead to, it could lead to a kind of dynamic legal systems. And of course, it depends on the level of analysis here. I'm not a lawyer, but I think we have to have fundamental reflections on that to keep the keywords: responsibility, accountability, compliance. We have to keep the keywords, but they will mean different things because the objects are different. I think if you move to artificial intelligence, to come back there, there was once an article in the Financial Times. My boss is an algorithm. That was the title of the article. And so the question is, how can we make algorithms responsible and accountable? Can we think this? Or is it the one who owns the algorithm or who uses the algorithm? And so we actually have to rethink issues of responsibility and accountability. And I think in the artificial intelligence, just because that's too general a word, just let's use algorithms. Is the developers of the algorithms, the transparency of the algorithm, the biases in the algorithms. And that's why I propose, and I have said it in other circumstances too, we need audits. We need a new type of audit. We have compliance audits, we have financial audits, we have performance audits, and I think we need algorithm audits or digital audits, or however you cluster it with the data. We need this is a different type of audit, because our audits are oriented to organizations. And as I said, we are shifting from the essence from organizations to databases which are used. So I think we need to add a fourth type of audit, which is the algorithm database type of audit. And this is not possible at the national level. We have to do it certainly at the European level. It can be the European Court of Audit, but at the first ones to the community of supreme audit institutions to say what we need is actually an agency for that kind of audit, a European agency which depends on Eurosci or the community of supreme audit institutions in Europe. I would use Europe because that's enough already. So that's my reply to this very relevant question of continuity, transfer, compliance, regulation. I think that's there. The power of the data I mentioned, that's the nationalization. The healthcare, it's healthcare is essential for. So I think I think the shrinking of the welfare state is impacting our policies vis-à-vis health. And we have to worry about that. And it's about affordability, access to healthcare becomes a crucial element too. So the access, which I said in OECD terms, it's geographical, how close is the hospital, do I have information to go to the healthcare, do I have the financial resources to go to the healthcare here. I think we are now expanding the healthcare from physical to the mental health becomes a totally new chapter in the whole dynamics of healthcare, and supply and demand. And I must say, I'm worried about this. I have no answers to this question, but I'm worried about that. And I'm happy that there is research happening on this here. I'm sorry for this very limited answer on this here. And on the evidence and the trust, I think, but as I said, trust is and has many dimensions, as the drivers of trust I mentioned already. And we can contain in the analysis. I think that it's possible to have very solid trust research. When you focus on a level, micro, meso, macro, when you focus on one of the drivers, so ability, belongings, integrity, participation, it is possible to do that. It's difficult to compare. It's very difficult to compare. And I think, but nevertheless, it's a time, there's a time dimension here too, which is becomes so dynamic, it even sometimes becomes impossible to compare in time. And that makes it even more problematic. But because it's so problematic, it's essential to study it. Not just in quantitative terms, but also in qualitative terms. Because I think we all are aware that systems that lose the trust of the people in the system, it's the most catastrophic thing that can happen. And we should make efforts to avoid this.
Thank you very much, Professor Gerd Bouquet. I think we could continue here debating and posing questions and hearing your answers. That is not possible for today, but I think we can schedule it for the next year again, as usual. So as we are at the end of our session in this auditorium that has the name of Professor Juan Mozica Freire, the founder of public administration in ISCTE, and he was my supervisor. So for that reason, let me also remember his name. And let me make also a brief closing remark for this great session, and saying that today's discussion reminds us that the future of the public sector is not simply something that happens to administrations. It is something we actively shape through institutional design, professional norms, governance choices, and the way we engage with the citizens. And that's a constant work for everyday futures, especially in this disruptive context that we are living today, not only at the social and economical level, but on the guidance of the political level, and I don't want to use the word leaders, but political guidance, which we were not expecting, I would say, in this stage of development of the society, and it seems it is increasing. So on the behalf of ipps-iscte, I would like once again to thank you, Professor Gerd Bucaert, for these generous contributions to our reflections on the future of public administration, and specifically with the context and graphics figures of the Portugal environment, which we greatly appreciate. I also thank you for all the participations in the room, online, for the questions and the engagement, and of course also to Inês and Rodrigo online that support this session. So thank you very much to all of you, and special to our Professor Gerd Bucaert.